The encountered morning sun filtered through the grimy windows of Liara's small apartment. As she checked her reflection one last time, her pink hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and her pale skin bore no trace of the luminescent markings that would normally identify her as Zelani, one of the star-wandering race that humanity had both feared and hunted. The cloaking pendant around her neck hummed softly, its ancient technology working to mask her true nature from any scanning devices. She grabbed her shopping list and headed for the door, stepping into the familiar chaos of New Brisbane's crowded streets. The city was a melting pot of refugees from across the galaxy, but most were human colonists fleeing corporate wars. Perfect cover for someone like her. The market district buzzed with activity. Vendors hawked everything from synthetic proteins to black market tech salvaged from derelict ships. Liara moved through the crowd with practiced ease, her enhanced hearing picking up fragments of conversation in a dozen languages. She was reaching for her credit chip when a shadow fell across her path. "You're not supposed to be here." The voice was low, urgent. Liara's blood ran cold as she looked up into the face of a man in his 30s, wearing a worn leather jacket over military-grade armor. His dark hair was streaked with premature gray, and his eyes held the weight of someone who had seen too much. But it wasn't aggression she saw there, it was recognition. Her hand instinctively moved to her pendant, feeling the concerning warmth that indicated it was struggling to maintain its facade. The man, however, didn't reach for a weapon. Instead, he slowly opened his jacket, revealing a tarnished emblem pinned to his chest, a silver star surrounded by protective wings. "My name is Riven Kaur," he said quietly, his eyes never leaving hers. "I was part of the Sanctuary Protocol. Back during the Purge Wars, I remember you, little star child. You were maybe 8 years old when you saved my unit from a hegemony patrol ship." Liara's breath caught. The Sanctuary Protocol had been humanity's secret operation to protect non-human refugees during the galaxy-wide ethnic cleansing campaigns. Most of those involved had died or disappeared years ago. "That's impossible," she whispered. But even as she spoke, fragments of memory surfaced. A damaged human ship, soldiers with kind eyes, her childish decision to use her people's ancient navigation abilities to guide them through an asteroid field. "Your ship was called the Compassion's Edge," Riven continued. "You told our navigator, Lieutenant Torres, that stars sing when they're happy. You saved 43 lives that day, including mine." The pendant around her neck grew uncomfortably warm, its failing system struggling against the flood of emotion, threatening to break her carefully maintained disguise. Around them, the market continued its bustling rhythm, oblivious to the reunion happening in their midst. Memories of war even guided Liara away from the crowded market to a small cafe tucked between a cybernetics shop and a ship parts dealer. The establishment catered to spacers and refugees, the kind of place where people minded their own business, and conversations were kept deliberately quiet. He ordered 2 cups of synthetic coffee and chose a corner booth away from the main flow of traffic. "The Compassion's Edge was my first assignment with the Sanctuary Protocol," Riven began, his fingers wrapped around the warm cup. "I was barely 22, fresh out of the Colonial Marine Academy and full of righteous anger about the hegemony's purification campaigns. Captain Voss thought I was too green for deep space rescue ops, but we were losing people faster than we could replace them." Liara studied his face, noting the scars that marked him as a veteran of the Outer Rim conflicts. "I remember your ship," she said slowly. "My father was dying, and our transport was breaking apart. The hegemony had been hunting us for months after we fled the mining colonies. The Zelani were targeted specifically because of your navigation abilities." Riven nodded. "The hegemony knew that controlling space lanes meant controlling the galaxy. Your people's instinctive understanding of hyperspace currents made you either valuable assets or dangerous enemies." The cafe's atmosphere processor hummed overhead, recycling the stale air and adding a faint metallic taste to everything. Liara's pendant had cooled slightly, but she could feel it drawing more power than usual. The emotional stress was making it harder to maintain her human appearance. "When we found your transport, it was venting atmosphere and falling apart," Riven continued. "Your father was unconscious, and you were the only one still coherent enough to communicate. Lieutenant Torres was trying to plot a course through the core of an asteroid field, but our nav computer had been damaged in a skirmish with hegemony raiders. I remember being so scared," Liara whispered. "But your crew treated me like I was precious, not like a freak or a resource to be exploited. When I offered to help with navigation, no one questioned whether I was capable. You closed your eyes and started humming. Riven smiled at the memory. Torres thought you were having some kind of breakdown, but Captain Voss ordered him to input the coordinates you provided. You guided us through that field like you'd been doing it your whole life, taking shortcuts that shouldn't have existed. The weight of yours seemed to settle between them. Liara reached up to touch her pendant, feeling the familiar warmth of the technology that had kept her safe for so long. After your ship dropped us at the refugee station on Kepler 442, I never saw any of the Sanctuary Protocol people again. The program was disbanded after the hegemony victory at Proxima Centauri. Most of us were declared enemies of the state. Riven's expression darkened. Voss was executed for treason. Torres disappeared into the underground resistance. I spent 5 years in a military prison before the amnesty program. Then how are you here now? Because the galaxy's changing again, and old wounds are opening up. The hegemony's grip is weakening, but that means the hunting season is about to start, all over again. The warning Griven leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. 3 weeks ago, I intercepted a transmission from a hegemony remnant cell. They're calling it Operation Starfall, a systematic sweep of outer rim colonies to identify and capture any remaining Zalani. Liara's cup rattled against the table as her hand trembled. That's impossible. The hegemony collapsed after the Core World's rebellion. They don't have the resources for large-scale operations anymore. Tell that to the mercenary companies they're hiring. Riven pulled out a small data pad. Its screen showing shipping manifests and personnel records. Crimson Lance, the Iron Serpents, Nexus Security Solutions, all of them have been recruiting former hegemony military personnel and buying up military-grade scanning equipment. The data scrolled past Liara's eyes, each entry confirming her worst fears. Ship movements, equipment purchases, personnel files of individuals known for their expertise in tracking non-human refugees. Her pendant grew warm again, responding to her rising panic. How did they find me? She asked, though she already suspected the answer. Your cloaking device is failing, Riven said gently. I detected the energy signature from 3 blocks away. If I can spot it with basic military-grade scanners, the professionals won't have any trouble. Liara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 15 years of careful hiding crumbling around her. She had built a life here. Nothing spectacular, but it was hers. A job at the local hydroponics facility. A few human friends who knew her as the quiet girl with the unusual hair color. A small apartment filled with books and the few possessions she had managed to keep from her original homeworld. There's more, Riven continued, his expression growing grimmer. The mercenaries aren't just looking for living Zalani. They're also seeking artifacts, anything that might contain your people's navigation knowledge. The new corporate powers are planning their own expansion into uncharted space, and they want every advantage they can get. My pendant, Liara realized, her hand moving protectively to the ancient device. It's not just a cloaking device. It contains star charts my grandmother collected over centuries of travel, which makes you twice as valuable to them. Riven nodded. But it also makes you twice as dangerous to keep around once they've extracted what they need. The cafe around them had grown quieter as the lunch crowd dispersed, leaving mostly spacers nursing drinks and waiting for departure calls. Liara noticed a man in expensive civilian clothes at the bar, his attention focused on a tablet, but his body language suggesting he was listening to conversations around him. We need to leave, she said quietly. Riven followed her gaze and nodded. I have a ship in docking bay 47. It's not much, but it's fast and it's clean. No corporate or government registrations that can be traced. Where would we go? Liara asked as they stood to leave. If they're organizing galaxy-wide sweeps, there's nowhere to hide. There's always somewhere to hide, Riven replied, leaving payment on the table. But this time, instead of running, maybe it's time to fight back. There are others, Liara, humans who remember the Sanctuary Protocol, survivors from a dozen different worlds. Even some reformed corporate executives who are tired of the endless cycle of exploitation. As they moved toward the exit, the man at the bar spoke quietly into his tablet. Liara's enhanced hearing picked up fragments. Target confirmed, accompanied by unknown human male, proceeding to probable extraction point. The hunt had already begun. The chase of the moment they stepped out of the cafe. Liara knew they were being watched, her Zalani senses, heightened by generations of evolution among the stars, detected the subtle wrongness in the crowd's movement. 3 figures maintained careful distances while matching their pace, and a 4th had positioned himself near the entrance to docking bay 47. They're here, she whispered to Riven as they walked casually toward the spaceport's main corridor. "I count for. Probably more we can't see," he replied without turning his head. "My ship is the Wanderer's Hope, berth for 7C, if we get separated. The access code is 7749 Alpha Zulu." The spaceport's afternoon shift was in full swing, with cargo, haulers and passenger shuttles creating a symphony of mechanical noise overhead. Departure announcements echoed in multiple languages, providing cover for their conversation. Liara's pendant was growing increasingly warm, its failing system struggling to maintain her disguise under stress. "There." Riven nodded toward a maintenance corridor that branched off from the main walkway. "Service tunnels lead directly to the docking bays. We can avoid the main checkpoints." As they turned into the corridor, the pursuit team moved to intercept. The lead figure, a woman in corporate security uniform, spoke into her comm unit. "Targets are deviating from predicted route. Moving to contain." Riven grabbed Liara's hand and broke into a run. Behind them, shouts erupted as their pursuers abandoned. Subtlety. The maintenance corridor was narrow and poorly lit, lined with pipes and conduits that carried the spaceport's life support systems. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows as they fled deeper into the station's mechanical heart. "Stop!" The security officer's voice echoed behind them. "This is Nexus Security. You're violating colonial authority regulations." A energy bolt sizzled past Liara's ear, leaving a scorch mark on the corridor wall. These weren't capture specialists they were using. Lethal force. Either the bounty was dead or alive, or they had decided she was too dangerous to take alive. "Left here," Riven directed, pulling her into a side passage that angled downward toward the docking level. The air grew thicker with recycled atmosphere, and the smell of fuel and lubricants. Liara's pendant suddenly flared with heat, its cloaking field flickering visibly. For a moment, her true appearance showed through the luminescent markings that traced along her skin like living constellations. The subtle elongation of her limbs, the way her eyes reflected light like deep water. Then the device stabilized, masking her alien nature once again. "It's failing faster," she gasped as they reached a junction where multiple service tunnels converged. "Then we need to move faster," Riven replied, checking his chronometer. "The Wanderer's Hope is 2 levels down and 3 sections over. If we can reach her, we can be in hyperspace in under 10 minutes. More voices echoed from the corridors behind them. Their pursuers had called in reinforcements. The metallic clang of boots on steel grating suggested at least 6 individuals were now hunting them through the station's infrastructure. "They're hurting us," Liara realized as they encountered their third blocked passage. The exits weave, tried are either sealed or lead to dead ends. Riven's expression darkened. Someone gave them the station schematics. "This is more than a simple bounty hunt, it's a coordinated military operation." A new voice cut through the mechanical noise, amplified by the corridor's acoustic properties. "Zalani refugee. This is Captain Marcus Webb, Nexus Security Division. You're surrounded and outgunned. Surrender now and you'll be treated according to Galactic Refugee Protection Protocols." Protocols that were suspended during the Emergency Powers Act. Riven muttered. "He's lying through his teeth." Liara pressed, her back against the cool metal wall, feeling the vibrations of the station's massive engines through the structure. Her people had always been sensitive to the songs of machines, and she could hear the Wanderer's Hope calling to her. From somewhere beyond the maze of passages, a small, defiant harmony amid the station's industrial symphony. "This way," she said, leading Riven toward a maintenance hatch marked with radiation warnings. "Trust me." Flight to Freedom. The maintenance hatch led to the station's primary power distribution center, a vast chamber filled with humming energy conduits and the soft blue glow of contained plasma. Liara moved through the space with instinctive confidence, her Zalani heritage allowing her to navigate by the electromagnetic signatures of the various systems. "The radiation warnings are mostly precautionary," she explained as they climbed through a maze of support structures. "My people spent centuries working in the engine rooms of generation ships. We're naturally resistant to most forms of energy exposure." Behind them, the pursuit team had reached the sealed hatch. Through her enhanced hearing, Liara could detect their frustration as they realized their quarry had entered a space that would be lethal to unprotected humans. "They'll have to go round," Riven observed, following her lead as they descended toward the docking level. "That gives us maybe 15 minutes before they can reposition." The Wanderer's Hope was a modified courier vessel, sleek and purposeful rather than elegant. Her hull bore the scars of countless hyperspace jumps and the patches that marked the ship maintained on a working spacer's budget. but her engines hummed with quiet power, and her sensors were military-grade despite her civilian registration. "She's beautiful," Liara said as they approached the airlock. "She's home," Riven replied, inputting the access codes. "And she's about to become yours too, if you'll have her." The ship's interior was cramped but efficient, with every surface designed for maximum utility. Riven moved through the pre-flight sequence with practiced ease, while Liara strapped herself into the co-pilot seat. Through the viewports, she could see security personnel surrounding the docking bay, but they maintained their distance from the ship itself. "They won't risk damaging station infrastructure," Riven explained as he initiated the launch sequence. "Too many witnesses and too much paperwork. They'll try to track us instead." The Wanderer's hope lifted smoothly from her berth, rising through the station's departure traffic pattern. New Brisbane fell away below them, a sprawling collection of habitation modules and industrial complexes clinging to the surface of an otherwise unremarkable moon. "Where are we going?" Liara asked as they cleared the station's control zone. "Somewhere they won't think to look," Riven replied, his hand steady on the controls. "There's a place called Heaven's Rest, deep in the frontier territories. It's run by former Sanctuary Protocol personnel and other people who believe the galaxy should be big enough for everyone." Liara's pendant had finally cooled to its normal temperature, the stress of the chase fading as they achieved orbit. Through the ship's sensors, she could detect the familiar patterns of hyperspace currents, the invisible rivers of energy that connected star to star across the galaxy. "I can help with navigation," she offered. "My grandmother's charts are still stored in the pendant. Some of those routes haven't been used since before the war." "Then we'll take the scenic route," Riven smiled. "Give Captain Webb and his people something to really puzzle over." As the stars wheeled around them and the hyperspace engine spun up to operational power, Liara felt something she hadn't experienced in 15 years of hiding: hope. Not just for survival, but for the possibility of a future where being different wasn't a death sentence. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for remembering, for coming back." "Thank you," Riven replied, "for showing a scared young Marine that the galaxy was full of wonders worth protecting." The Wanderer's hope slipped into hyperspace, carrying them toward an uncertain but hopeful future among the stars. Behind them, New Brisbane continued its eternal dance around its parent world, one less alien refugee hidden in its shadows, but carrying within its memory the echo of an ancient promise. That sanctuary would always exist for those brave enough to seek it. In the depths of space, stars sang their eternal songs, and for the first time in years, Liara sang back.